So thanks everyone for coming along this afternoon. It's technically midday. I've done this in the spring, which was like part one of the Magic Marketing and Mindset. So rather than repeat it all, I've got some new things here. But if you haven't seen it yet, it's on the Spring Fair's website and on YouTube, so I can share a link later. But enough about that. So we're here for Magic Marketing and Mindsets even more. Very quick introduction, so we can get on with everything. There's a little recap, as I say, from what I've done before, just in case you haven't caught that, because there's some of the real important parts, I think, and the really interesting things about the whole psychology of marketing and buyer behaviour. Then we've got our new bits, quickly whiz through those. Then, rather than me talking all the time, I've gone through a couple of videos as an ad break for everybody. And then, finally, just three very quick suggestions or advice to do with having a magic mindset for whatever we want to do. So say a quick introduction. You don't really want to have me sort of say about what I've done and my whole life history. So all someone needs to do is basically go onto Google and put Steve DCUK. And then from that, you'll see my LinkedIn, the company website, and you can get in touch and see our stuff on YouTube and the aforementioned video. Although I wouldn't recommend looking for me on images because I just double-checked, and apparently the first one is this Steve Harrington character from Stranger Things. So apart from that, I'm quite well optimized. Very quickly, just about DCUK, and then we'll get on with everything. So as it says there, DCUK, we always say we're the wooden duck company, but the two key things that I like to say to everyone is the fact that as a brand, we like to make people smile, and it's making life a little bit better. I think we can all agree that there's lots of stuff going on in the last sort of like year or two. So what's really exciting for us is to work with retailers and shoppers and customers and individuals just to make, have a smile on your face and make it a bit more fun. And how we do that is through these characters you see here. All of our characters are individually hand-painted and crafted from old bamboo roots. So they all take painstaking amount of detail on them, and they're all individual, or you can personalize them with their names. And as you can see from the little video in the middle there, there's a lot of detail goes into it with how we make them. So that's a little bit about us, but you can see us on the internet. So what did I do previously on Magic Marketing? I've sort of talked about some of my top 10, and I think if you've got any passing interest in neuroscience, behavioural science, nudge marketing, all these sort of things, I think I checked, and there's, I'd say, maybe 120, 130 of them. So a lot crossover. I've got sort of 10 of my favourites, and I picked 6 of them I did in the spring. And what I'm going to do, though, is to sort of round out the top 10. These 4 here I'm going to talk about, which is the peak-end rule, loss aversion, and primacy, and something called the pratfall effect. And they've all got like slightly strange names, but as you'll see, if you don't know already, they're all very common sense based. But also, the two there, cinemagraphs and this brain taming idea, are sort of 2 of my favourites. So I just want to sneak them back in again, but with a slightly different spin. So, okay, before we start then, so what are we actually talking about? I've just pulled out a couple here, so sort of the common approaches. You might know about this one, Mind Management, by this chap called Steve Peters. And he's very well known particularly in sort of like the sports psychology world. So the likes of Sir Chris Hoy and Team GB on the cycling team have utilised his skills and his approach, this chimp paradox. And that comes from that sort of cheesy picture there about the monkey mind, as it's known, which is a Buddhism term. And it's all about having like all of us inside of us has got this sort of monkey mind, and it's this uncontrollable, slightly reckless, toddler-style approach to things. And it's how do you, they call that chimp paradox, how do you tame your inner chimp? And how do you sort of play to it? And it's all about your biggest critic, like your sort of Simon Cowell or your Trini or Susanna, like in your head, always nagging at you, always trying to like feed into your ego. So this approach is all about that. The more common approach in my sort of world of sort of interest area is thinking fast and slow, which is the more popular and the accepted approach of the System 1 and System 2 thinking. And it's a similar idea, I suppose, where I think 95% of what we do, our decisions, are based on System 1. It's this immediacy, instinctive, intuitive, mental shortcuts, getting on with things. And then 5% of what we do is a bit more considered. It's rational, it's slower, making more complex, more sort of based on logic rather than instinct. As I say, and that's Daniel Kahneman is a recognised sort of founder of that sort of process. But me, I'd like to do things a bit differently. So what I've done for the last few years is I've tended to sort of focus myself on Mr. Nosy and be Mr. Marketing. So I'm just really nosy and love finding out why people do things, what makes them tick, why did that person buy that, why did my mum give me that for Christmas, why did I buy something I've got one of already, and all those sort of things. And my sort of version of the chimp, as it turns out, is effectively this bury the brain. I think if you've got this idea of this, you need to keep this annoying, somewhat annoying but very demanding brain person that you've got working with you, how do you sort of help him out, and how does he help you in your daily life? So hopefully that will come to the fore when I go through these slides. So that's my basic approach. And this whole thing about rational versus more sort of emotional and instinct, I think the whole movement, effectively, of behavioural science and the marketing side of things is, as it says there, they all live rationally ever after, is something that we don't really believe in that rational and logic and having sort of an economist approach to the world is something that you can articulate it and write it down, but it's not really real in like the magical sense. I think so. Having that sort of emotional, unexplainable things is something we deal with every day. So that's my sort of take on these. And just to sort of sum that up, Arthur C. Clarke, who's a very well-known science fiction writer and personality over the last sort of like 60, 70 years, so he said, like, magic is just science that we don't understand yet. I think that's a nice way of trying to like keep like the geeks happy who do all this scientific and fact and research-based, along with some of us sort of marketers who are a bit more free and easy and want to have the fun and embrace the magic of it all. So what I've tried to do on here, a bit similar to last time, is so I've got those 6 behavioural effects. The last one might be a bit more than maybe 3 or 4 minutes, but I'll try to keep it down to 2 or 3 minutes just so we can go boom, boom, boom. And then I can share this with people afterwards on email and what have you as well. So the first one then, we've got this loss aversion. Again, something that probably we've all experienced. It's very much the psychological and the feelings you get from losing something is 2.5 times greater than actually gaining the same thing. And an easy example of that is through contactless payments and things like that. The massive rise of Uber for in the taxi side of things. It's rather than and metro cars and things like that on public transport, is you're not physically handing over like your £5 or £10 or you're putting your £3 to the bus driver. You're paying contactless. It doesn't feel the same. And there's loads and loads of research and studies, which again I can share with people, and I've got some links and things, but where there's up to like 10 or 11% more money spent on different payment processes depending on that whole pain sort of threshold. But it very much is based around that whole, what drives you, and you're more worried about losing something. And Rory Sutherland, who's a sort of key person in the field of behavioural science, he's had an idea where he was talking about saying with driving licences, rather than saying, oh, well, you've got 3 points on your licence for speeding and here's another 3 points, he said, maybe you should start with like your 12 points and then you lose 3 points. And then there's going to be a much more powerful thing. You're actually losing it rather than you're gaining the points. But it's also a little bit to do with like FOMO, like the fear of missing out as well, can come into loss aversion. If you quite can't see that, but it's an idea where you've all might be in a restaurant or you're waiting to meet up with someone and you think, right, that's it, I've had enough. Like, you're in a brain again. You think, right, let's go. But then you think, well, actually, but what if I come now? So the fear of what you might miss out on sort of overrides perhaps like the logical, instinctive thing is like, we can quite easily go and go to the next place, or I can just catch the next bus, or I can go and do this next meeting. But then this whole weird sort of loss aversion thing comes into play. And then very quickly, another example on this. There was a study of a chap who was basically going through when eggs were going up and down in price about sort of 10, 15 years ago. They were looking at what the demand was and if they could link that to loss aversion. So when the price of eggs was going down by 10%, as you probably expect, we were selling more of them because people thought it was a better deal. They got more money to spend. They could get more for their cash. But then when the price of eggs was 10% more expensive, it wasn't reflected in a similar way. It was actually, as it looks there, nearly 8% of people didn't buy them because it got more expensive. So it's there where the sort of the pain of actually the savings is actually not as good as the pain of like the loss you've made. So it very much backs up the fact that having the fear of the loss is more than what you benefit from. Primacy is a really good one, and again, this covers probably about 5 or 6 different sort of behavioural biases. This was an interesting one. I'm sure we all know the concept of good old heads or tails. And this one's linked to I suppose, like a conversational approach, in that when you say heads or tails, you've effectively primed somebody to say heads first. And there's a really famous study that happened about 10 years ago where they asked a number of people to say, basically, play heads or tails and choose. And it was just over 80% of people chose heads every time because they've been primed and already mentioned by calling heads or tails as part of that sort of convention to choose heads. Just to see if that was true, they then flipped it the next day or the next session. And they said, right, let's have a game, choose tails or heads. And it wasn't quite 80% the other way, but it was about 70% of people instead chose tails first. So there's that weird thing where because it's been implanted in their head and it's been primed to talk about heads or tails, it's funny how they chose that first. And there's something similar to that, actually, a little anecdote I'll share that don't want to give the game away, you'll never beat me at rock, paper, scissors, but the whole 1, 2, 3, looks a bit dodgy, doing 1, 2, 3 and then say rock, paper, scissors. Because your brain is basically already doing the rock, then it's very counterintuitive to do the fourth time and do another rock. So the way you need to remember is that your opponent is statistically very, very unlikely to play rock because their brain does not want to go again. They're going to do that or do that. So that just gives a little nugget there. That gives you a chance of winning like rock, paper, scissors more often than not. This one here on primacy is good. There was a really big study where they were asking how much you understand about, you sort of prime someone about you've never met before. So on the left-hand side there, we've got those 6 different adjectives. And what the study was, it was asking people saying, this fictitious person you never met before, we want you to basically think about and describe who they are, maybe have like associative words and imagine what job they do, that sort of thing. And they basically said, this person's intelligent, industrious, impulsive, critical, stubborn and envious. And you'll notice that it starts off with very positive traits and very a welcome personality perspective, all the way down to like the negative ones. And what Solomon Ash did, who's the guy doing these, he basically asked people questions, and as you expect, they were saying, oh, yeah, this person sounds great, he sounds like someone I'd like to work with, and they started applying other positive traits to them. Well, then what he did, he had a separate group, and he flipped it around the other way, and started off with the negative traits first, and then had the positives. And amazingly, it was completely flipped around. People were actually applying other negative traits to this fictitious person, saying, yeah, I mean, he might be intelligent, and I could work with him, but I don't think I'd like to go on a drink with him, or I think he might be a little bit impetuous, and I think, yeah, if he's stubborn, then he obviously knows he's good. And they've started to be projecting negativity on this fictional person, purely because of the way that it had been portrayed. So yeah, so it was very much on the sort of downside. And then finally, this is more of a fun version. It's called the Slow Walker experiment. And it was very similar again, that there were 2 groups of students, and they were under the premise that the first group were told, okay, old age, it sucks, getting old, let's discuss what's bad about getting old. So they talk about all the bad things. So it could be like, your friends are dying, you're old, you've got no hair, it's cold, your memory's going, all those sort of things, frail. And then they asked the second group, but instead they flipped around the other way and said, oh, what's great about being old and like the positive effects? So people were talking about, well, I haven't got kids anymore, I've got my own money, I know my own mind, got more free time, I can maybe go traveling, that sort of thing. And the actual test wasn't what they were talking about, it was how long it took them to leave the room and walk down this long corridor and go out. And what they found was that the group that were talking about the sort of bad points of being old is they took a lot longer to walk out than the people that were talking about the good points of being old. So the only difference in the whole conversation was about what they were talking about. So it's very powerful how this, your brain without realizing is being primed to effectively, if you're talking about really bad things or you're talking about positive things or hot things or cold things, that really does make a difference, whether it's a website or an email or a personal conversation. Thirdly then, so the peak end rule, this is very much sort of like a jazzy term. I won't read all this out, but it's a jazzy term really for everyday conversations and experiences, really. As it looks like there, it could be a bit of a roller coaster, and that effectively is going back to this Barry the brain and your inner chimp, is that basically it's really lazy. We want to have things as quickly as possible. That's why I put the sort of too long didn't read on there. And what that effectively is your brain is being like a highlighter pen, just going through saying, okay, just skip to the end, tell me the highlights, like the football match. I don't want to see the whole thing. Show me the near misses, show me the goals, what was the result? And that happens in our daily lives all the time, across everything. And the peaks, because they're emotional or sensory peaks, because they're the 2 biggest sort of distractions and the 2 biggest impulses are the senses we take in and the emotional connections. The peaks can be high and low. So when we talk about peaks, it's not like what's the best bit of your holiday or what's the best bit of my talk today. It might have been what's the absolute worst bit of your holiday or the worst experience. I'm sure we can all have examples of someone says, how was Corfu, on your holiday and stuff? And you immediately just think of like, oh yeah, that dog weed on me on the beach, or oh, that really nice restaurant I went to. And then you remember like the trip home or looking at the pictures or what you did on your last night or the sort of the feelings you got or the suntan you had or or conversely like the sunstroke that you caught. So having those sort of peaks is really, really important. I think, and that's a really easy one for us all to remember when we're having a meeting, talking in person, going on a date, or doing a web experience. It's all about making sure that you have as many of the peaks that are positive and that the end is effective as possible. And of course, an easy way to do the end is very much through like after-sales service or customer care. You've had a meeting with someone, do the LinkedIn connection, or maybe follow up with an email afterwards, send them something, talk to them, ask them about what you discussed. So that whole peak end rule is very important. But I think it can be summed up by, I won't do loads and loads of sort of cheesy quotes, but one I've used for many years, which sums up, I think, not just this, but a sort of a nice way to be. It's from, you might have heard before, but from Maya Angelou, where about the fact that people forget what you say and what you do, but they never forget how you make them feel. And I've seen that so many times, how that works across everything in life and in work. And I think that sums up on the peak end rule, that if you can make it about the emotion, connections, or celebrate somebody and make it worthwhile, that's a really good way to make it distinctive. So I put Cineglass again because I pushed them last time and I still haven't seen many of them out there. If you don't know what these are, I think we all know animated GIFs and how you can use them on websites and on emails and certainly on Facebook and social media. But why I want to push these is because they've had more and more prevalence. They've been around for about 12 years now. So I've got a couple more examples. And I think if you take anything away from my little session today, just at the very least, go and have a look at some. Show your friends, colleagues, team, whoever, family, and just say, let's put one of these on Facebook, or let's put this on our blog, or let's put this on our website. Emails don't always work depending on the platform, but generally they're an animated GIF. But instead of having full motion or no motion, what a cinemagraph does effectively has a piece of video and only focuses one piece of movement and the rest of it's static. And that gives you, as you'll see, very, very much a sort of storytelling approach, and it's a real stop and stare. So Diesel did something that they're one of the earlier ones, again going back about 10 years, and you think, okay, that's just a bit weird, why is that suddenly moving? So you imagine if you had this on like a Facebook feed or having it on a website, or you were advertising those trousers or that jacket, and you had this on your product page or your listing. It just has that little nudge that you may or may not catch. It just immediately captures attention and sort of makes it a bit more quirky. And then you can use those on like billboard, digital posters and things as well. But the good thing is when you start to put just one tiny bit of movement in, this could be wind on the beach, it could be something else, it just suddenly has a story behind things. And I think anyone you talk to in marketing would talk about storytelling being like the age-old sort of trick of marketing. And I think rather than just saying, it's a watch, isn't it great? You can put yourself in that position and think, oh, it's a watch on the beach, it's outside, and it goes back to that whole memories, and you start basically projecting yourself onto the product or onto the item. Food is a really good one because the thing like supermarkets, when they go around squirting water on all their fresh fruit and vegetables and do that circulating that they do. So having a little graphic that just starts showing like a tiny little bit of that just immediately freshens it up for people. And then, so apologies to sort of any vegans or vegetarians, but those sort of things, if you were advertising a barbecue or a special event or a chicken meal or something like that, then you can almost you take the senses again, your taste buds are going, and you can almost smell like that charcoal coming out of there. So just by having that can make a huge difference to a static picture. And again, that's just no example of how that could work. But what I finished with, just to show you on this, is that image there, whether it's advertising like a trip to Norway or down on the coast of Cornwall or the type of jacket, that's a nice picture, but I'm sure, hopefully you'd agree that just by having a little bit of movement on there, it just completely elevates it up again. And if you're scrolling through, say, a Facebook feed, or you've got that as an image on, it's not video, it's an animated GIF, but you've got that on your profile page or something, it just really elevates it up. So I'd definitely recommend at least looking for those. And I've had a go myself. I can do some crude versions of these, and I'm pretty rubbish at like Adobe Premiere and stuff. So if you don't know how to do it, I'm sure you'll know someone who can help you out, or an agency, or a very geeky colleague or friend. And then almost the last one. So this sort of funnily named pratfall effect. I mean, that's a technical term, but it's basically about being more human and showing a bit of like a sort of fallibility and being a bit more sort of transparent. and what that's about is, again, this sort of human tendency to basically do things a little bit different and show like you're not like a 10 out of 10. You're not nobody's perfect. Everyone's human. I'm sure we can all think of examples of celebrities or certainly even politicians who done something a little bit naughty or a little bit silly and end up, basically like the whole classic expression, like they fall out the window upwards. You think, hang on, you've done something really dodgy. You're caught with your hand in the cookie jar, and people think you're more popular. What's going on there? And it's not like this bad boy scenario. I think it's very much to do with this pratfall effect. And I think if I got it on here, I might have to just check it's on. Nope. So what they did on one example I've got on here is there's a really famous study which was done with a bit similar to the idea about the different adjectives I talked about, where just to prove like if people are likable, more likable by being human and showing a bit of sort of fallibility, is there was a video taken of an actor who was shown to get 95% of questions correct. And there was two endings shot. One ending was the guy just happily walked away. Thanks very much, I got the questions right. The second ending was he tripped and like dropped a bit of coffee on the floor or spilt some hot drink on him. And they showed the two endings to a couple of groups of people again. And the group that saw the ending of this guy getting most of the questions right and then casually walking out, they basically said, oh, same sort of thing as before. What do you think about this guy? Is he likable? First impressions and all that, what it's all about. They're basically saying, yeah, nice enough guy. The second lot of people that saw their second ending, where the guy got all the questions, most of the questions right, and then stumbled and like dropped a bit of coffee on the floor, they actually liked him even more. And they were very much saying, oh, this guy's great. And they started projecting ridiculous levels of positivity on this person. You're thinking the only difference that they saw was the fact that he'd dropped some coffee and spilt a hot drink. But just to show that you need to have a little bit of sort of credibility. So we can't just all go around being clowns and falling over and like being multimillionaires. You have to have a little bit of substance in the first place. So to prove that, they did another second follow-up study where the same guy was recorded doing those same two endings, but in this instance, he got most of the questions wrong rather than right. And in both those cases, there was a slight difference, but both of them were saying, no, the guy's a bit of a plonker. He's obviously, doesn't get the questions right, doesn't know what he's talking about. So you have to have that element of, I suppose, skin in the game, whatever it was called, to be a level of credibility, which is why some politicians maybe, however much they muck around, you're still not going to like them. You have to have some form of respect for them in the first place. And then the one I just sneaked on there, so on the pratfall side of things here, certain brands can get away with it based on who they are. So you might remember this, which scarily is actually 4 years ago now, when KFC, shock horror, ran out of fried chicken in the UK, and there were people up in arms about it. They had a very playful approach to it, and their fallibility, that the logistics was mucked up, and they made some mistakes. They basically put their hands up and actually turned it into a positive campaign. And there's many studies on this, that they've actually got better brand sort of positivity and encouragement and all the sort of good signs about it as a result. But I think fried chicken and fast food is one thing, but imagine if I was the marketing director at like Santander Bank, and I said, really sorry guys, we've completely stuffed up, we've lost all of your data. We couldn't just have a little bit of a lull moment and have a bit of fun with it afterwards. And similarly, like Apple Watches or Samsung says, oh, we've accidentally like lost the whole network, it's all gone down. They wouldn't get away with a joke like this. But equally, I'm pretty sure everyone would have seen this over a period of time. But the good things come to those who wait with Guinness. And this is very much about big brands that can really go to it and think, okay, let's turn a negative into a positive. The fact that Guinness takes so bloody long to pour, and it's a real faff if you've ever worked in a bar, they actually said, let's flip it round into a good thing. It's like, hey, let's make that like a virtue rather than like a negative. And you've got other ones like good old Stella saying, reassuringly expensive. And Lion's Cakes, this whole naughty but nice. Like, yes, it's going to you look at it and you put on a stone in weight, but it tastes really nice. And the good thing for that, again, there's other studies that show that those brands that basically are open about their flaws and even turn it to a positive, people are more likely to trust them in this world of like antitrust and who's trying to dupe me. Is to think, well, if you're being honest about that, then you're more likely to be honest about other things. So it's very much that whole human being more transparent. And last but not least, on this final bit then, is my sort of favourite. Say, internal dissonance just sounds like something you just drop in, for like brownie points. But I prefer brain taming. Going back to this little guy here, sort of Barry the Brain is, I've got him going in my head. I'm going around supermarket. I'm coming to the autumn fair. I'm going to look at the stand over there. Barry the brain is coming with me, like it or not. So how do I tame my brain so I can hopefully be a better salesperson, be a better dad, be a better shopper, whatever it might be. And some quick ones I'm going to just cover now is about how does Barry the brain, or Belinda the brain, if you want to call it that, go through words and numbers, fonts, typefaces. How do we make sort of funny compromises? And then the one that I think is really exciting or interesting for marketing is the sort of unrealistic expectations. So the reason I put this on here, you might have heard the expression foot in the door, and it's a very sort of metaphorical and literal sense in the classic sales thing, where sales guys puts a foot in the door, and the expression is that you go in with a small offer, or you basically give someone a way to get involved, and then you sort of scale it up. So if someone chatting to you about having a nice holiday, and before you know it, you're trying to buy a timeshare, or that sort of thing. But from the marketing side of things these days, what's more exciting is the flip side of that, which is basically called door in the face. And it's one that sounds really crazy. You think, how can that possibly work? But that's an example of where you effectively, you scale down. So it's a compromise thing, where logic, again, going back to the beginning, when I said that some people, and it's all about rational and logic, and it makes no sense. The beauty of magic, if you think about that, and magic marketing, is it doesn't have to make sense. It's just you understand why it might work, or these trigger points. You can basically use it to your advantage, go along with it for the ride, whatever it might be. So the door in the face idea, so you start off with something big, and you basically then sort of scale it back again. And then one slight example, one example I've got in a minute is more realistic, but one great example from a chap called Robert Cialdini, who's done loads of work on this. He asked, again, going back to two groups, always seems to work. He asked one group of people and said, imagine if you're in this group yourself, and said, would you be prepared, there's some young offenders and coming out of prison and stuff, can you basically take them to the zoo on a trip? We need some people to help them. And he got a certain amount of people to say yes to that. The second group of people, so imagine you're in that group, they started a conversation and said, yeah, we've got these young offenders in prison. It's really important, to sort of rehabilitate them. So can you spend a couple of hours, every week for the next 2 years, just being their mentor? And of course, probably got short shrift for that, tumbleweed moment. And they said, okay, fair enough, but it's really important to us. So how about we go to the zoo with them and take them out on a trip? That'd be really nice. Do you think you'd like to do that? So the two groups then effectively were asked the same question at the end. Will you take these kids to the zoo? But the people that were straight up said, will you take these kids to the zoo? 17% of people said yes. The ones that said, can you basically have a massive commitment and take them, every week for the next couple of years, and then said, okay, but fair enough, can you take them to the zoo? 50% of them did that. So it's this very weird, crazy sort of compromise where you sort of scale down. And I sort of thought, does that sound a bit rubbish? Is that a bit far-fetched? And when you start thinking about it, that does happen, whether it's kids, talking to your mum, talking to colleagues. And there's a slightly frivolous example here where these kids say, can we get tattoos? No. Can we drive the car? No. Can we get ice cream? It's oh, yeah, go on then. So they've almost scaled up, to sort of go in. And it sounds a little bit crazy again, thinking that's never going to work. But as one of the examples I've got in a minute about language, it absolutely does. Maybe not as extreme as that sort of silly example, but if you start thinking about it, this whole scaling up and then going back again, where we say to somebody that it's expectation management, that something's going to cost them a lot of money, or I might say to you guys this morning, I might have done it already, by saying, okay, we've got an hour and a half, we're going to do all this, and you wrap it up in 20 minutes, you've actually scaled it back again. There's a couple of things here about good old Comic Sans. For anyone who's worked in design or creativity, thinks that gets a bit of a bad press. It was really popular and famous at the start of 95 when Windows came around to be very much pushed at child-friendly. It's supposed to be acceptable and very engaging and very fun-loving, and sort of different to boring old Arial and Times New Roman. So if you had it written this is again Barry the Brain, he reads welcome to our newsletter in Comic Sans. He thinks, yeah, okay, cool, fun. My expectation is it's going to be interesting and fun. Off we go. Then you start having things there's a big sign that might say, big sale now on. And because it's written in that typeface, you might not think about it, but if you're working for a fashion retailer, or you've got bags for sale, or you've got really nice homeware or something, big sale now on in Comic Sans, whether they like it or not, is subconsciously to Barry the Brain saying, basically it's cookies or it's like some kid stuff. Maybe they've got this young enterprise at primary school and they're trying to flog like these like bottle tops for 20 pence. So it has this weird effect on people. And then a big extreme is that certainly if there was a sign on a door that said danger, no admittance in Comic Sans, it's like a sort of passive aggressive, like, again, you might not realise, but people it's like, ooh, danger, don't come in here. And it could be like a sheer drop, or there's like someone's about to blow your head off, but that's almost like, please, pretty please, don't go in here. So it's very important, again, that the typefaces you use make a huge difference. And one great example of that, it's not so much about what's written on there, I just did some placeholder, but again, another study where what they did in America was they asked people who'd never seen it before to have some quite detailed information about, I think it was alien technology, so something they wouldn't know. And they said to one group, okay, read Arial, read this piece that was in Arial typeface, and then they asked questions about it afterwards and sort of check their comprehension. And the second group had this Bodoni typeface, which you can probably see, even if it's a bit small, it's a lot more sort of dense, harder to sort of like get your head around and to read. And going back to that whole logical and illogical, and even myself, if I was looking at this and someone asked me to make a bet, I'd say, well, it's quite obvious that the people that read the top one, they're going to understand it. They can skim it easier, they can read it much quicker, they're going to understand it quicker than the ones at the bottom. But as it turns out, it's the other way around. Because the typeface at the bottom is so hard to read and so difficult, Barry the brain is sitting there thinking, like, I don't understand, he's got to really concentrate here. Come on, Steve, you and me have got to buddy up and have to read this really hard. So they're taking more of it in than just skimming through the top one. As it turned out, it was around sort of 85% of people were getting the questions right from the second group down the bottom, and about 70% from the top one. And just to see if that was just a weird anomaly, the people replicated it across the whole Ohio in various universities and schools, across all the subjects, whether it's physics, maths, English, that sort of thing. And the same idea was like seen again. So everyone who had like a harder to read typeface actually got better results and got better sort of recall. So it's very interesting again, just how your brain works, those sort of things. Lastly, on some numbers. I mean, I'm sure some of you have heard or at least seen of this, where the idea of like charm pricing. And that's about where you've got this dreaded, rather than saying it's £30 or £20, you go for $29.99 or $19.99. And the sort of explanation for that, I suppose, if you want to try and demystify the magic of it, is that what happens is, because from a very young age, we're traditionally taught to read from left to right. So the first number that your brain instinctively sees is the 3 or the 2. So regardless of the fact we're talking 1p here or 5p if it's 95, the charm of the charm pricing is that someone's immediately looking at it and their mind is thinking it's £20, not £30. Even though logically, if you sat down and studied it, you'd think it's exactly the same. If you're in that sort of marketplace, in that situation, again, you can't help it, your brain does that. The one at the end, the third one, which says $29.99, that's, notice no pound sign on there. And again, there's been some studies on this quite recently, and Richard Shotton, who's I definitely recommend checking out his book on Choice Factory on this idea. One of his things in that book was talking around the impact that charm pricing has, and also by not having the pound sign, because just by simply talking about money, going back to that loss aversion, you start panicking and thinking, I make a decision, I'm spending money, whereas $29.99 is just a number. It's a thing associated with something that hopefully you like or want to buy. And again, it doesn't sound logical, it doesn't sound right, but what they found on studies on this was that quite spookily, on the charm pricing, by having the 1p less, it was like a 9% increase in people were buying it and engaging, so 9 and 9. But then, really excitingly, was 8% of people, more people, purely by taking the pound sign off, were actually buying more of the items. And you've seen that, you probably recognise in some of these more high-end burger joints or sort of nice sort of fast food places they have. So that's a bit of a paradigm, like nice fast food places. But by not having they sort of call it like 10 or 20 or $14.99 without the price, they're obviously cottoned onto it. But you think, it might sound cheesy, it might sound silly, but you think, for the sake of 8% of extra people engaging, or 9% on that, it's surely worth a try at somewhere you're doing. This last one here, so it's called the rule of 100. And I mean, there are some exceptions to this, but as a general rule, if you're selling or looking to buy anything that's under £100, it's going to be far more compelling for that immediacy thing again, if it's a percentage rather than the money. So in that example there, if you had something that was 10% off 20 quid, 10% sounds a lot bigger and a lot more exciting than just £2. You think, £2, it's not really worth it. On the second side, so anything that's over 100 quid, if something feels like that, as you can see there, 10% off £150 doesn't sound that good. £15, all of a sudden you think, well, actually, ooh, and your brain's going, that sounds pretty good. So it's quite an easy rule to remember is under £100, go with the percentage. Over £100, go with the numerical sort of saving or the discount money you've got off. And then I think this is the last bit on this. So it's not one of these weird acronyms like YOLO, but in my last session I did, which is, again, it says on YouTube, I went through the sort of how to make friends and influence people and that whole persuasive words. And the word because, I've even taught my kids, the word because is the most powerful word you can use. It's all on there. This is another phrase which is amazing. It sounds really crazy, but it's really, really good. And that stands for, but you are free. And what we mean by that, there's a few ways you can sort of distill that. So, but you are free is the actual expression, but you can replace that with, like, if you'd like, feel free to, if you wish, but don't worry if you can't. And what you do with those, particularly in conversation, is that you give this, it sounds really sort of manipulative, but you effectively give people the opportunity to have their own sort of free will, you know, or their own decision-making when you really want them to do something or to help you or to agree. So you might say, like, oh, sir, if you really want to, then give me a call at 5 and we can talk about about tomorrow. So they're going away thinking it's in their court. But statistically, it's proven that by using that phrase in there, again, their little internal brain said, no, you've got to deal with this guy now. You know, you've struck up an agreement. You have to ring him at 5 o'clock to talk about that. Or you say to your mum or something and say, Mum, I need picking up tomorrow at 4 o'clock. You know, but don't worry if you can't. It's fine. Don't worry if you can't. And then, again, they've done loads of studies, and statistically, just by adding that little frivolous thing at the end, it's a little bit like maybe you're that sort of like guilt-tripping him as well, potentially, but it makes a massive difference. And when I put this together the last couple of days, I looked at it and thought, are people going to buy that? You know, they think I'm talking rubbish. I went through and checked my emails from the last 2 weeks, and scarily, I was using some of these phrases in emails to colleagues or suppliers, people like that, saying like, oh, you know, feel free to, and even customers, like, feel free to buy this, or please get in touch, you know, but only if you want to. And I went, and it was actually working. So it's a really, really powerful tool. And it's not just me saying that. For statistics, there's, I think it's been over 20,000 people across 42 different studies just on, but you are free to. So if you look at that on Google or on the internet, it's an amazing thing that most people don't seem to talk about, but we are doing it maybe in every day. But if you can maybe make a conscious decision to try to put these in, you can become like, I can't guarantee we're all going to be like, you know, the most like Mr. Compelling and Mrs. Compelling overnight, but it's certainly going to help you. And then last but not least, this is the best stuff, I think, for sort of internal brain, going back to this little fella down here. I did cover this last time, but it's so like really cool how it works across everything, is sales and Black Fridays and queuing. Like if you went to queue for a coffee in a moment or a croissant or something, if you go in there, pick up your coffee and just go home and go back to the stand again or carry on, fine. If you get there and there's 2-3 people in front of you, Barry the Brain's saying to me, come on, Steve, we're queuing for 10 minutes here for one poxy coffee. What's the deal? So just to keep Barry the Brain happy and to tame him, you go, oh, go on then, let's have a croissant. Actually, I'll have a bottle of water while I'm here. So you're basically like rationalising the time spent by queuing. And there's lots of things on that again where particularly studies to do with cake shops and donuts where people have spent longer queuing, and restaurants, I could do a whole hour on that. Restaurants who do a whole thing about filtering you in with the wine list and getting you to wait for your table. There's loads of studies that show people spend more money, they come back more, they're happier customers because they've actually done that, because they've kept their brain happy by taming it and basically making it worth the wait and worth the while. And how that works with Black Friday and sales is this weird sort of disconnect, again, this dissonance, where you might have like 10 items on your website, or you go to a site for Black Friday. So your brain's saying, right, we've got some cracking deals here, I'm in a moment, we're going to get something great. You get there, it's all sold out, all the stuff there's just a bit crap, you know, you don't actually want it. But again, your brain's going, whoa, come on, you promised us a deal here, you know. I'm mentally prepared now to buy something from this sale. I was going to get something on Black Friday or the Amazon Prime Day, you know. What the hell? So you end up buying something almost like, you know, because it's burning a hole in your pocket type thing. And again, it sounds ludicrous, but it really, really works. And the final thing on that is something that I've seen myself at DCUK, is this whole thing about promotions and competitions. And it's completely irrational, where you might say we've got 10,000 entries to try and win a holiday or a cruise. You give people like a week's notice and say, oh, you know, we'll announce it next week or something. It turns out that all those people have gone away, and like it or not, almost all of them have gone away, and they've mentally imagined, like, oh, and the brain's saying to them, oh, Steve, I can see it now, kicking back, having our third cocktail, just looking at the waves rolling by, oh, it's going to be awesome. The chances are ridiculously slim you're going to win that. So, of course, closing date comes along, you haven't won. Brain's going, whoa, come on, like the toddler. You promised me an ice cream, where's my holiday? Where's my free barbecue set? Come on. I've mentally planned to spend that time with my girlfriend or take the kids to that theme park for those tickets. So what you do is, by offering, going back to that door in the face idea, by offering people a substitute or maybe a discount for something else, they end up buying that or sort of scaling to that. And it's been proven, even in our own cases, that more people buy things as a result of that than by not having a prize incentive at all. So again, it's very weird, and it makes your brain happy rather than sad, but it's just something worth bearing in mind. So just summarise all that then. So again, I'll send this over, but one line on each. So what was all that really about? So the loss aversion, I generally think that you just really need to consider that 2.5 times more powerful to lose something is to gain something. So just think about that in everything that we're doing. This whole primacy idea is just really have a think about the words that we use and the positive things that you say. And again, it sounds real common sense, but just be positive about things, and it reflects, if I'm engaging, hopefully that people will be engaged back with me. The PKN rule is much more about the emotional side. So just, again, it's maybe a thing for life. Just be really positive, amplify those emotional peaks. So whether you're working on a business or having a relationship or talking to potential customers or something, it's all about remembering the highs and being memorable and distinctive, and how do you do those? Cinemagraphs, say, very least, just try them out or show your friends. The pratfall effect, rather than use that phrase, just be more human. Again, sounds really obvious, but make your brand, your product, you more human. So the words you use, be more open and fallible and sort of transparent. And I think that's happening now. People are being more real, and they're after authenticity is a big thing. And then finally, that whole internal dissonance, the brain taming. I think you should be curious about everyone's Barry the brain. So yes, you might think your lot of brain's been going around, but think, okay, what's my customer's Barry the brain doing, or what's my mum's Barry the brain doing, or what's my wife's, so have a think about that, and I think that should be a good effect. And then if you're still around for a little bit now, I'm going to sort of finish off. There's a couple of 2-minute videos here. I want to sort of finish on fun, that whole PKN rule perhaps, trying to be positive. First couple here is very much about how you can inject fun into things to nudge people into doing a bit. I mean, I did a lot of this last time, but into basically acting more than just being sort of cynical and negative. And then the last one, I'm a big fan of this inattentional blindness, which some people call subliminal advertising. That sounds scary and a bit manipulative. Inattentional blindness is a scientific phenomenon, and I think there's some fun stuff with that as well. But first off, just show you this one. And not sure if you've seen those around anywhere, but it's a bit like you might have seen a picture of David Beckham's face, or Boris Johnson, or Liz Truss now probably, when people put chewing gum on the board, on the face. I think you probably admit as well that looks pretty disgusting as well. So that hopefully will help people to stop smoking. But what's interesting as well, they use that for positivity as well. So it's more fun. I think it's 46 to 48% better at cleaning up the streets. And also they managed to get some, even some, from my perspective, some great geeky insights into what band they should have, or tribute act at that venue, or what that community project should have. So they're actually using it for multiple purposes. And the whole sort of idea of making things more fun, there's one example on this one here. So those sort of ideas, it says there, it's very much about fun. I think there's other things where, I know Seattle is well known in America for being really good at it's sort of like fun and innovative architecture, and there's lots of little nudges to help people to take the stairs rather than the elevator, as they say in the States. So things like simple things like hiding the lifts in a really dodgy place and having the stairs really obvious works. But what some places have done in Seattle is that they've actually made the stairs really inviting, in the sense that on 2 or 3 of the sort of stairwells, or they've turned them into meeting areas with a floor-to-ceiling glass panel, and you can see like the best view in the whole city of the skyline. So if you're in a really boring lift, black, boring, straight up to your meeting room, wherever it might be, by taking like a 2-3 minute detour, you can actually see like one of these like holidaymaker style views of the city, and they saw that made a massive difference to people that actually took the stairs rather than took the elevator. And these guys also did things where in like London tube stations, where rather than walking up going up the escalators, they turned the stairs overnight into a little piano. So one of these sort of kids things where you walk and it goes plink, plink, plonk, plonk. And again, they saw that made a difference. So I think the idea just have a bit of fun, is definitely something to be grateful for. And then finally on here, this one, say it's inattentional blindness. I'll let it explain itself, but I'll be impressed if someone gets the answer right. But have a look and see what you think.
Today we're going to play a game specifically designed to test your spatial awareness. Meet the Brain Games Double Dutch team. Now, what does jumping rope have to do with the brain? Well, Double Dutch requires off-the-chart spatial awareness. And today, these kids are going to help us test yours. For this game, all you have to do is keep track of the number of times that either of the girls in green jumps. You'll count each time one of them lands a jump, like this.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
As you can see, these jumpers are pretty quick on their feet, so you're going to have to pay attention to keep up. When the whistle blows, start counting. Ready? Go. So, how many jumps did the green team make? Did you say 38? If so, you agreed with 40% of our test audience. Now, some of you may be onto us, but for those of you who aren't, did you happen to notice anything else going on during the Double Dutch? Maybe a giant chicken strolling right through the middle of the set and doing a funky chicken dance? Now, some of you may have missed that funky chicken, but many of you probably saw it. And that's okay, because the chicken was just there to distract you too. Here's the real question. What color was the wall behind the Double Dutch game? Here's a hint. It wasn't the same color at the end as it was when they started jumping. The back wall was changing color the entire time, from bright blue to bright red. Nearly everyone misses it. But why? It turns out there's far too much information coming in through the eyes at any given moment for the brain to fully process all of it. As a result, the brain has to act like a spotlight, focusing our attention on some parts of the scene but not others. Now, most of you were probably paying attention to the jumpers, and some of you may have suspected that something strange was going to happen, so you saw the chicken. But you probably weren't paying attention to the back wall. And what we don't pay attention to, we don't see. And hey, for those of you who managed to catch everything so far, did you notice that we also swapped the rope turners out halfway through? Gotcha.
And I also did my own little thing as well. So if you notice, if I go back again, the little dinky duck on the bottom there, which retails at a very good $19.99. I actually switched that one around after a minute as well, just to see if anyone noticed. I think the reason I put that on there, as I say, what I did in the spring was everyone talks about John Lewis, about being like up there with like the great TV ads or TV moments when it comes to Christmas ads. And on that particular session, I was going sort of being passionate about an ad from about 10 years ago where they had the Billy Joel, which was Always a Woman to Me. And that's way better than any of the Christmas ads, in my opinion, because they use this inattentional blindness to effectively, I think the research showed it was about 38% increase in sales. And what that one, if you remember seeing it, is as a baby goes all the way through to like be a great grandmother, all the way through their life. It's a really powerful, compelling John Lewis style ad. What they do, because the girl all the way through that age range was wearing red, a very primal sort of fight or flight sort of colour, is that you were doing that idea where you were like inattentionally like just looking at the woman going all the way through life. And it's a lovely ad and you got the sentiment. But what they were doing, all the way through that, they had all the product placements, whereas now it's a bit more sort of gimmicky. Back then, though, they were having like the fridge she opened was a fridge you could buy, the extended warranty was there on the table, the homeware stuff was there, the pictures she put the drinks out were there, all of that, which contributed to a fantastic uptake in sales. So that's a really powerful example of this inattentional blindness and more than just subliminal. So I just thought it was a bit of fun to share that with you guys. So very finally then, thanks for sticking around. Just very three quick things on, not to be too sort of life coachy about it, but just three sort of mindset tricks really, if someone's interested. First one there is like saying, don't worry about the future, but at least not all the time. I think that's because I think we all know that everyone's like banging on about things saying, oh, what's the next big social media platform? What's the latest tech? What's happening tomorrow? What's a competitor doing? Oh, what's the next price going to be? And you get worked into a whole frenzy about it. The honest answer is most of us don't even know. Even people I know I've worked with that are called like chief futurists or like innovator extraordinaire, they haven't got a clue really. It's just their best educated guess. So I think, yes, it's great. We need to think about the future and plan for the future. But I didn't think I'd quote this chap about anything in any of my speeches or talks, but good old Lex Luthor there. But what Jeff at Amazon said was he gets asked this question like, what's going to change in the next 10 years? But what he doesn't get asked, or hardly ever, is what's not going to change in the next 10 years? And you might think, okay, what does that mean, really? But it's this thing where, okay, in the here and now, in 10 years' time, people are still going to want those experiences. They're still going to want great customer service. They're still going to want added value. They still want to be able to smile when they see something. They still want to have that projection of themselves or representation of the clothes they wear, whatever it might be, or in Amazon's case, they want to have fast delivery. Like in 10 years' time, they're not going to say, we want Amazon to be really, really slow at delivering. So what they focus on is how to make the current things better rather than keep thinking about like the cult of the new and the next thing. So one easy example of that might be that you might find out that if you own a shop or you've got a colleague that's fab at customer service and they're really engaging at the till in a local like gift shop or something, is no one would normally say, well, let's make that experience better and have like a seat next to the checkout bit or make the table more inviting and more open, and encourage that. They're always looking at what's the next tech to put in the window or what's the next like system they need to put in. So sometimes it's just a suggestion to stop and think about what's great now and let's do more of that, rather than sort of spend stuff almost like gambling on the future. Second one, just an excuse to put this quirky GIF in, really, but this whole thing about if you can't be beautiful, be bold. And what I mean by beautiful here is not so much like the physicality of beauty, but beautiful like if you've got a beautiful mind, beautiful as in have you got a product that really works, have you got something that's like the top of its game. It's basically like if you're someone who's like the top of the number one or the top of the list. If you're not that, then you basically, instead of that, you just need to be bold. And what I mean by that is this whole thing about standing out, doing things a bit differently. If all the brands or all the competitors or all your colleagues or friends, wherever it might be, you think, okay, I'm not like them, or my product or my company is not like them. You can't hope to compete with the pretty people or whatever it might be. Just be bold. And by that is, none of them are actually advertising in that place, or nobody's like having a little like display out in the forecourt out there. They're all coming in here. Or they're always sending out emails on like a Tuesday at 11 o'clock. And why don't you send stuff on a Sunday afternoon and hit different audiences? And the reason I put the apples down there as a reminder about standing out, there's again, a really great book, which is for an academic book, is really interesting about being a rebel with a cause. There's a lady called Francesca Gino, who's a Harvard professor, and she did a little survey with her marketing students, and she sort of asked them to like rate her based on like her aptitude and her approach and her sort of personality and her skill set and that sort of thing. And they sort of gave her like decent feedback. The next day, she wore like bright red trainers or sneakers, as they call them. And she got way better results. And exactly the same lesson plan, exactly the same information, exactly the same approach to everything, just by wearing these ridiculously bright, loud red trainers, which stood out from all the other Harvard professors that had to wear quite a strict dress code. She basically got a better impression and better results. So I suppose that suggestion there that don't feel like, oh, it's a lost cause because that company's better than you, or that brand's done better, or that colleague's done this. There's ways to do it. Again, sounds really easy, but I just thought I'd stick it in there. Then finally, there's something that just, it's always good to end on this, is that I think as a lesson in life, really, I think it's always great to be more playful or mischievous. And this whole thing with marketing is about that. It's like, have a bit of mischief in the world is always a good thing. It's far too boring. You know, there's enough sort of, let's be honest, crap going on in the world as it is. So the more fun we can do with things like those bins, with that sticker idea, just be a bit more playful and have some fun. One quick example from our world at DCUK, you might be able to see at the bottom there, we do a little pop-up that comes on a website like other sites do about first sign-up discounts. We did a little test a couple of months ago where it was 10% discount, you know, no thank you. And just for fun, I put one in there saying this one, 10% discount, or no, I'd rather pay full price. And looking at the A/B test we did, they both did really well, which was really good. But this one outperformed almost 2-to-1, the one that was just saying, I'd like a discount or no thanks. Because it's almost like your brain again saying, am I really going to tick this to say, I'd rather pay full price? So that actually get the sign up. And we've had, it's getting on for like 10, 11% sign up now, which is incredible, you know, for our sign up rates. Just by having a bit of fun and being a bit sort of cheeky, I suppose. Similarly, going back to that filler text, if any of you have ever had to do a piece of print or work with an agency or even do something at home, when you have this lorem ipsum filler text, there's a really good, again, I can send it to people, there's a really good website that summarizes 15 fun ones. I had to sort of tactically hide the Samuel L. Jackson one for cleanliness reasons. But what you do with those, this is the thing where you ask how many paragraphs you've got, how much pages you've got, and rather than just having a blank space, it generates random filler text. The Office one is good because it's all these weird sort of bullshit bingo that people play, you know, with like you hear like, you can choose there what your agency might say to you, what your boss might say to you, and it generates random text based on what you want to fill for like a newsletter, or you want to do a mock-up of something to see how much space on a web page or a blog. And then the cat one is just a bit of a fluffy, literally, quirky one. And there's one there which is a literary one which picks out like famous novels that are now in public domain and then does that. And there's some really crazy ones like zombies and stuff. So again, people are having fun with something that's a really boring part of our world. And this one I sort of do like just get it off my chest. I'm not ashamed of, but even at my old age, when I see one of these signs, I still really can't resist going past them and then putting this on them. I have actually, in my time, I've worked at a couple of places that have been quite like stiff and serious and formal, and I've done this and got in a bit of trouble. But the sort of the joy that I got out of it, and like got a bit of a dodgy rep for doing it in certain places, I still can't resist. I mean, the one time I did draw the line was just for the summer holidays, where I went to a library with the kids, and some child had made an out of order sign. I didn't want to deface that, but apart from that, I think it's fair game. So, good old Mr. Columbo there. So just one more thing I wanted to say, and maybe this is the pecan rule, but thanks for sticking around today. So what I was going to say was, right at the beginning there, I was saying about you can find me by putting Steve DCUK into Google. So if any of you manage to like track me down that way, I would sort of just say hello and hopefully like what you got out of the session. At the very least, I can give you a discount code on any of our products at DCUK, and I'll pick a couple of you and just let you pick whatever you want for free as a free gift for sticking with me and coming through. So apart from that, that's me finished, and thanks for your time.